Okay, so a couple of days ago, a big dump of Epstein files was dropped. And as it turns out, one of Epstein's doctors was Dr. Peter Attia, which you may not know who he is, but he's, in terms of the longevity and sort of health space, he's one of the top of the food chain people there. He's one of the most famous kind of longevity doctors. And what it turns out actually is like, so this happened on Saturday. I saw it kind of in the late afternoon, and I went down a rabbit hole. I looked at some of those email conversations that were in the on the Department of Justice website, just to confirm for myself, that these documents exist, and it wasn't like fake stuff going around. So there was over 1,700 documents, but a lot of it is duplicates. So it's a very frustrating experience actually going through all those documents. They don't make it easy for you to search, which I'm sure is intentional. Stuff is redacted. So a lot of people on X are doing the good work of kind of extracting some of the stuff and kind of putting together a little bit more of a coherent picture of some of these conversations between Epstein and Dr. Peter Attia. And at first, like my first instinct was, I want to, post something about my thoughts about this, but it wasn't necessarily to smear him and just kind of focus on this Epstein thing, which obviously is huge and shocking to many people in the health space, especially his followers and stuff. But what I noticed as I kind of started looking on X, as soon as the news dropped, or the kind of this dropped on X, in the next hour or two, a bunch of doctors with 10,000 plus followers, they started like going hard on him, like disgusting, revoke his license, it's like, and saying like, outright calling him, you know, bad stuff, without any actual evidence of him having done any bad stuff yet, at least yet, which I was like, man, that's like really, really the shark smelling the water, and immediately kind of, because he's the top of the food chain, and all these people under, they it seems like they would just were waiting for an opportunity to kind of smear him and take him down, because that allow that's how the way these power games kind of work, like everyone is always trying to, you know inch up a little bit on the social ladder and whatnot, and they find putting others down, helpful. But I was like, that's kind of, ugh, that's kind of gross, it was very, very kind of quick to do it. I was like, I don't want to do that. But here's the thing, the reason I'm recording this, I guess 2 days later, less than 48 hours later, is I kind of thought a little bit about it. What exactly do I want to say? Because I don't want this to be about the actual and I will cover, in case you don't have time to research it, I will cover some of what was said between the two, just for your information. But again, the reason I wanted to do this is because over the last, I guess, month and a half, maybe 2 months, I've been meaning to do a review, a kind of a critique of his longevity book, Peter Attia's longevity book, which is called Outlive. I'm sure you may have heard of it. And I wanted to just kind of talk about how bad the actual practical advice in the book is. No, so the book is obviously, it took a long time, a lot of effort, a lot of people were involved. So it's well written, it's well edited. In terms of that side of things, quality wise, that way it's good. In terms of like the stories around how we discovered certain things, like insulin and the cancer research going on, and how, like, some of the medical history and some of the science history, the stories are good, but unfortunately, that's kind of the way publishers want books to be written. You want a lot of kind of flowery bullshit stories, a lot of kind of like case studies and stuff, but like with an emotional connection. And I get that part. People connect with story. The problem with the book is, beyond that, it's just him kind of in a pretty narcissistic fashion, patting himself on the back, with kind of an air of humility that is pretty easy to see through. for many people. And I always used to give the guy the benefit of the doubt because he's Canadian, and Canadians, like, they're nice people, and they're not like, other than a few bad apples like Justin Trudeau and whatnot. Canadians are good people. So I would always kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. He's just a brainwashed doctor. That's why he's pushing the drugs, the statins, the PCSK9 inhibitors, and the COVID vax. He just doesn't know better because most doctors have been so badly brainwashed through their pharma sponsored medical training. However, uh, I kind of wanted to critique the book because he's talking about medicine 3.0, how this is so like his shit is so advanced, and I think it costs 100 to 200,000 per year to get his concierge medical sort of care. And we don't know what Epstein was paying him, maybe a hell of a lot more. Maybe that's why he chose to work with him, even though he knew. The emails, I think, start around 2015 and onwards. So he knew the guy was convicted. Epstein was convicted in 2008, so he well knew what's going on, but money talks, and everybody listens, type thing. So, but here's the thing: the book, and I will get back to this. I promise. I didn't jot down notes, but I know exactly the topics I want to cover here. But I will kind of switch back and forth. But so my critique of the book would be, he's like all about medicine 3.0. This is the cutting edge, but when you look at it, how little actual advice he gives you, it's a laughable. And anybody that knows a thing or two about health knows that Peter Attia is a joke. And I'll tell you, just as one example, I had a client, an osteopath client in Australia, and we were talking with him. This was last year. We were talking with him, and Peter Attia's name came up. And this guy, the first thing he said, "Oh man, Peter Attia is a clown, man," in a very cool Australian accent. So people that actually know stuff, they know this kind of mainstream medical doctors. A lot of them are just full of it. Like, you hear these people, they sound intelligent, they sound educated, and then they're like, they give you all this research, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, here's a video on one. I get two vaccines every year." This one, like, literally this morning, I watched the video. This one doctor, I don't know, 300,000 subs on YouTube. And he's like, all this research, and it's actually like, good stuff, and debunking bad supplements and whatever. And then, "Oh, here's why I get a COVID and a flu shot every year." Rah, 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 rah. You know what I mean? Like, so in his book, Atiyah's book, Outlive, which has sold more than 2 million copies, he has 1 million subs on YouTube, 500,000 on X, 1.7 on Instagram. So he's like mainstream. And back 8, 10, 12 years ago, he was talking about keto and low carb, and that, like, the diet matters for health. And he was doing all the fasting stuff and talking about it and popularizing it. And then what has happened since is he went back on the fasting. He stopped doing the fasting because he lost a lot of muscle mass, and his hormones and his thyroid, his testosterone were tanked and whatever. So he's like, "Oh, this is dumb. I'm gonna stop doing it." He didn't kind of publicly announce it, but he did mention it here and there in the book and in his shows and whatever else appearances he had, which was many. But so in the book, really all he tells you is get on a statin if you need it, which you probably will. Type really, like, just pushing the statins. The cholesterol causes heart disease, all this BS, right? And then he says that in his opinion, exercise is the best longevity drug. I mean, like, how dumb is that? Exercise is the best longevity drug? Seriously? Seriously? So he talks a lot, and like his stuff, prescriptions around exercise isn't too bad, like, I mean, it would, for many people, it would be useful to kind of do some of the stuff around movement and injury prevention type stuff. That's totally fine. But to say that exercise is the most important thing, and to gloss over diet, I think it's 2 or 3 chapters on diet, and they're pathetic. They're just pathetic. Basically, he just tells you, make sure you're eating enough protein, and he just talks about protein. He has his opinion on online of seed oils is like they're fine, And actually, I heard him on a podcast over the last couple of days, or on a YouTube video, saying that he is insulted when he goes into a restaurant and on the menu they say that they don't use seed oils, and he's like publicly saying, "Get that off your menus. I'm insulted." Like, what sort of a moron is this guy? You're thinking, right? So that really grinds my gears, because he also recently, as I was, because I was downloading some videos of him talking about fasting. I want to put it into like a presentation at some point and post it. But I found a recent, over the last month, a podcast episode with him and another guy called Lane Norton, where they're talking about seed oils, and they were supposed to have that the what's his name, the Paul Saladino dude. He's cool. He was supposed to be arguing the anti seed oil case against Lane Norton. He was supposed to be the pro side, and then they were supposed to have a moderator or two, I think, that one of them pulled out, and then Paul Saladino pulled out of the debate because it would have been him against Peter Attia and Lane Norton. And the problem there is it's two against one, because we both are like not pro seed oils per se, but they're like debunkers of this anti seed oil propaganda, right? So they're like the one's a PhD, one's an MD. Like, they're really smart. They've seen the research, and the research doesn't add up. If anything, they're actually beneficial. They say in sometimes based on some of the research. So really, just pathetic. Like, if you're like out there pushing CEDOS as good or neutral, like, it's pathetic. And anyone with that knows even a thing or two about health can see through this bullshit. The problem is a lot of people don't know anything about health. They gravitate towards these mainstream people with hundreds of thousands to a million, followers type stuff, and then they get misinformed, and then they get harmed in the long term. And of course, they're gonna get good information with it, but they're on these huge aspects. They're getting horribly misinformed. So that's where I have a bone to pick with this guy, because the problem there, and the other problem there is also him, Atiyah and Leighton Norton. It turns out they're investors in this thing called David protein or David bars. These are basically protein bars that they use a kind of a fat in there that's apparently a derivative of some fat from canola oil, and apparently it's some kind of fat that it's it doesn't get absorbed due to its structure. So you can get the taste and the texture nice in the protein bar without the actual added calories of the fat, because it doesn't get absorbed. And apparently some people were getting, like, I don't know, anal leakage or whatever, or diarrhea from it. So not everybody, but anyway, so there was a huge conflict of interest on the seed oil debate, if it was Paul Saladino against these two guys that are clearly pro seed oils, debunkers of the anti-seed oil stuff, and at the same time they're investors in a company that they have a seed oil derived fatty acid in their bullshit protein bar, because protein is so important. That's literally all of the freaking advice he gives you, Peter Attia, in his magnum opus of a longevity book. He doesn't give you any genuine advice on how to prevent cancer, diabetes, heart disease, even though he talks about them in at length. Has two chapters on cancer and I think Alzheimer's. So he talks about these diseases at length and what causes them. The pathophysiology, not what causes them necessarily, because a lot of it is diet driven. So he doesn't talk about what actually causes them, but he talks about the pathophysiology and the amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's, and the research, and what could be done, and this be done, can that be done, and doesn't actually tell you anything to do with your diet, right? Because of course, when you kind of start, and this is where it kind of ties into the other stuff, when his connections now with these people, Epstein and co, of it starts to make sense. Why can someone that smart really be that stupid? How can he be that stupid that he cannot see that these oils, which didn't exist in terms of them being in the food supply 150 years ago, and all of these diseases were nowhere like in the numbers that we have now. And somehow it's all about the research, the random, and the most important being the randomized controlled trials, with him and Norton talking about the randomized controlled trials, if anything, show benefit, especially against saturated fat, or show them being neutral to seed oils. So it's like at some point, even the most sort of trusting person be like, like, why, whoa. But that's just one piece of the puzzle. Like, okay, the seed oils thing, but he's also pushing statins, and he was also pushing the COVID vax, a few years ago. And just this morning, I was walking my dog. I was just kind of looking at what other stuff does he have on vaccines, and one of the first things that came up it was him having someone on his podcast that's a vaccine expert, and they were basically talking smack about people that that parents, they're trying to help parents not be misinformed by the anti-vaxxers, and people that were confused, to try to shed some light on it. And basically they were kind of talking a smack about Andrew Wakefield, and then some guy that debunked him. And Peter Attia is like, if you just watch and read all of that material, and if you still think that vaccines are connected to autism, I can't help you. Like, I just, nothing will change your mind. So I try to put it delicately that, we just have to agree to disagree. So really just very sort of condescending and sort of smug ways to kind of make it that if you don't agree with my pro-vax stance after reading all of this information, you're just too stupid to understand it, and I just have to like be politely disagree with you, agree to disagree with you, and let's just knock it on the head there. So really, just he comes off as humble, which most people can kind of see through after a while, I think, because it's this kind of thinly veiled humility that is based in like it's seemingly narcissism. And actually, somebody shared a 12-year-old um TED talk that he had done where he actually fakes crying in the video. It's actually pretty like just kind of cringe to kind of watch. This is some psychologist dude on X that shared it. He's like, this is what like narcissists do. They will feign the crocodile tears. But here so here's like the thing. The thing I really kind of wanted to bring to your attention is like, and a quick segue actually. I had about 8 clients on my Sunday call, support call last yesterday, and I at the start of the call I asked, anybody here know who Peter Attia is? Actually, only I think one person had actually heard of him, but hadn't even like didn't know his work. So I was a little bit relieved that he's not as popular as I would have thought, because even though longevity in the longevity space, he's like huge, not everyone is in that sort of subgroup of people that are following it as closely as others. And a lot of my clients, they come from this sort of stance that doctors aren't to be trusted for the most part, especially the mainstream ones pushing the statins and the vaccines. So even if they would have saw and heard of him, as soon as they heard him talk about statins are good and whatnot, or pushing vaccines and stuff, they would have been like, this guy's, I'm not going to listen to him. So that was a little bit of a relief. But I know there's a lot of like normal people out there. Not that my clients are abnormal. I'm just saying they're more like, let's just say they're more of a lot of them are more of the, freedom minded, questioning a lot of narratives types, if you know what I'm saying. Uh, love them to bits. And so it was a bit of a relief, but on the other hand, a lot of, like I said already, a lot of people that so, for whatever reason, you have a health scare, or you're someone close to you has a health scare, you're like, I need to start looking after my health. And then you start eating better, and one of the first things you will see is Peter Attia's stuff. If you look up fasting, low carb, blah blah blah, comes up, so he's the top of the food chain, so he's basically sucking in to his vortex a lot of people, and again, basically brainwashing them. Statins are good, cholesterol is bad, saturated fat is bad, uh seed oils are totally fine, just don't overeat calories, and just make sure you're getting enough exercise. That's kind of the best longevity drug. And then of course we're going to put you on other drugs, because you got to be on the other drugs. Okay, this is medicine 3.0. So it doesn't, now with kind of seeing this Epstein stuff, it doesn't surprise me that he's pushing these narratives, because in order to get to that level of popularity, it's two things can happen. So you either get there through the help of, let's just say, people that can help you get there, okay, connections and such, or you could, probably rarer, you could get there on your own, but then there comes a time when you get big enough on your own where it now may or may not be, how do I say it, it may or may not be useful for these folks to get you either on their payroll, ideally on the payroll, just so that you're easy. If you want to play ball, you get on the payroll, happy days. And then, but that means that you have to, as I say, toe the party line. You have to not talk about certain things, and then potentially promote other things in it, and it's kind of I understand, by the way, if you're like deeper into this stuff, I understand that I'm just talking about a very, very inconsequential part of these files. There's like millions of documents here. There's much more important stuff in there, that and some horrific stuff that needs to be discussed and brought to light, and all that good stuff. And it does seem like these sort of lower level figures, like actors, even some politicians, musicians, they're like a great sort of scapegoat to take away attention from the more nefarious stuff, because people know Jay-Z, they know whatever, Beyonce, and whatever actors and other people, so they're much more interested in like looking up the drama on the internet about those folks than people whose names they've never heard, that kind of way. And I understand, I'm kind of doing that as well, but like this is my corner of sort of the world, is kind of health and longevity. So I wanted to add my thoughts to this part of the small part of the conversation. I can see a lot of people are doing good work in terms of exposing stuff on X and whatnot. So y- keep in mind, I understand this is not the most important thing, but when it comes to it, what the most important thing for you is your health, right? And then ancillary to that is your sources of health information. And if you stumble upon somebody that's like a sweet talker, that they seem to know a lot, it you could well fall into the trap of trusting someone, because that's the thing. If you're like him, Atiyah, millions of followers, millions of books sold, number one New York Times bestseller, that carries so much weight that people stop questioning his recommendations. This is where people can fall into that trap, right? So yeah. So where I was what I was talking about is, so to get to that level, you either know people, you kind of sell your soul to the devil, as it were, figuratively or maybe even literally. God knows. And then doors open, contacts open, and whatnot. You go to parties, and partnerships, and companies, investments, checks coming your way. So that's one way to do it. And then the other way is, if you build it yourself, they can come in and kind of say, look, hey, you like money, you can make more money, more connections. And then of course there's this third way of blackmail, which is obviously what the guy Epstein was doing a lot of. So the thing is, you can't assume everybody that he contacted and worked with, was doing some horrific shit. uh but the thing is that everybody did know who he was and what he was up to. Now, the problem then was that some stuff that came out about Atiyah is that there was one email where he says, I need to go there someday. I need to visit someday. So that's about the little St. James Island. So that's obviously not painting him in a very good light. There was another email where he says to one of Epstein's assistants, no, thank you so much. See you next time. Hopefully, Jeffrey Epstein in town when I'm back in 2 weeks. I go into Jeffrey Epstein withdrawal when I don't see him. Okay. That was in 2016. That's pretty crazy. Then another email from June 2015, Peter Attia to Epstein says, you the biggest problem with becoming friends with you, to Epstein. The life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul. So Atiyah said that. Oh yeah, so regarding the little St. James Island, he said, I need to visit sometime. That was in April 2026. So pretty, like, it's clear that he knew that this guy was up to like no good, because what one another thing that I saw the early morning, some doctor on X, uh another spotted another email in the big list of duplicates and whatnot. So Atiyah said to Epstein, home is very good, work stressful, making some changes. What is fallout from recent story? That was December 4th, 2018. I think that's when Epstein was arrested that second time. So what is fallout from recent story? Epstein says zero. No. So then Atiyah says in another email, legally any change? Epstein replies zero, right? So seems like he kind of knew like the stuff that was going on and he was doing, you know. So this is really the part where I'm like starting to think again, why is he pushing the COVID stuff? Why is he pushing the statins? Why is he a seed oil apologist? Is it a because to be in the club, even it's in its ancillary, sort of in the outskirts of the club, to be in the club you have to play the game and say things that you're supposed to say, and not say things that go against certain things that are, going to be helpful to the people in those circles, which a lot of them will own pharmaceutical companies or shares in them, and politicians, government officials. Like, I don't know how deep this stuff goes and the people implicated here in these files, and I don't know how much research you've done. I've not done a lot of research personally because it's so dark and disgusting. But like, holy cow, it's insanely horrific. Like, I don't think everybody is ready to actually, learn what was going on and what's going still going on. Some people, it would be too much psychologically. And like I saw on X, some people were like, holy cow, it's like, if this is the stuff that they released, just imagine what stuff they didn't release, and it's still, in the dark. So it's horrific, it's insane. But it kind of makes sense why this person, this doctor, is pushing all of the stuff that like, no, like, people like me and other folks I know in the health space. Like, this is, either he's just a brainwashed, overeducated dumbass doctor, which there is many of those. That's kind of the problem with medical school. They make it that way, so they really fuck you up. Excuse my French. Hold on.
My friends, I'd like to apologize for the behavior of my passion.
Okay, that's better. I have this every time. I have a swear jar here, and I also have this apology from a Key and Peele skit. It's really funny. I might play the rest of it at the end. Damn, I lost my train of thought. So yeah, so this is this is the state of the mainstream. Unfortunately, you have to be so careful with with this stuff. And I know that many of the people listening to this podcast, like yourself, I'm sure you kind of know this stuff already, but this is a tiny, tiny, tiny segment of it's a not a representative sample of humanity at large. So we have to really help other people understand, man. Like I saw people there that were like, oh my god, I was following this guy for 5 years or whatever, I'm just gonna burn his book, or I just discovered this guy, I love his book. And people were like just horrified because it is horrific. I'll tell you another thing I saw yesterday is, so in the last chapter of his book, Peter Attia talks about kind of, he basically in 2017, Tuesday, July 11th, 2017, he received a call from his wife that she was in an ambulance with their infant son. He was 1 month old, roughly, Ayrton, on the way to the hospital, and he had suddenly stopped breathing and fallen unconscious. His eyes were completely rolled back in their sockets, and he was lifeless and blue with no heartbeat. Only the quick reaction of our nanny had saved him. She rushed him to Jill, who is a nurse. That's his wife. Her instincts took over. She immediately put him on the floor and began performing CPR, rhythmically but carefully pressing her fingers on his tiny sternum as the nanny frantically dialed 911. 911. Freudian slip. Inside job. 911. He was barely a month old by the time the firefighters stormed into the house. 5 minutes later, he was breathing again. And then he was actually lucky to be alive. The fireman said that they almost never see these kids come back. They told her they still don't know how or why it happened, but this is likely what occurs when babies die suddenly in their sleep. They choke for a moment on their own saliva, or some other vasovagal insult occurs, and their very immature nervous system fails to restart their breathing. Yeah, or or some kind of issue with, let's just say, jabs. Okay, let's just not be immature, you know naive children here. He's a medical doctor. Probably his kids were jabbed from day one, and it's horrific. It's horrific. But then what happened is, she called him from the ambulance. He was in New York in a taxi on 54th Street on his way to dinner after his wife, where was I? So after she finished telling me the story, I just said without a shred of emotion, okay, call me when you get to the hospital so I can talk to the doctors in the ICU. She got off the phone pretty quickly, and of course, it's obvious why she was upset. Our son had nearly died, and the right thing for me to say the only thing to say was that I was getting the next flight home. Jill stayed in the hospital with their son alone for 4 days. She pleaded with me to come home. I called in daily to talk to the doctors and discuss each day's test results, but I stayed in New York busy with my quote important unquote work. Okay, he quotes that in the book. Eh, Um, Ayrton's cardiac arrest happened on Tuesday. I did not come home to San Diego until Friday of the following week, 10 days later. Even today, just think about what happened. I feel nauseous about my behavior. I can't believe I did that to my family. I can't believe what a blind, selfish, checked out husband and father I was. And I know I may never fully forgive myself for it for as long as I live. Now, this, this obviously is a harrowing story, and it's what turns out is that in one of the emails to Epstein's assistant, I think, uh, or maybe no, to directly to Epstein. So on Thursday, July 13th, so 2 days later, 2017, he says, so let's see, sorry, so July 12th, 2017, Peter Attia says to Epstein in an email, sure, what time? Then Epstein emails him later, 9:30, And then the next day, July 13, 2017, Atiyah says via email, sure, I can come earlier. Also, if you have a hard stop at 10, let me know. So, that's kind of that's kind of horrifying, that his important work was with Epstein when his son nearly died. So and there's a few other things in there that were kind of pretty nasty, but I kind of don't want to overload you with stuff. But it's kind of, I think that's why people were a little bit sickened and so shocked, because like he was always like this. He seemed like this, like like Canadian, like Canadians again. You wouldn't expect a Canadian to do some bad stuff. Canadians. He was always like well spoken. He was always trying to be diplomatic. He seemed to never want to ruffle any feathers with anyone. Probably that's why he didn't want to have like a hard stance you know on anything that's a little bit too controversial, because then if you're divisive on the CEDAWs, then if you say make a statement on anything where there's two parties that are like battling it out, you're always like gonna incur or sort of get the wrath of the other party. So it's, I understand. I don't understand. I don't understand why someone has to be so spineless, but I also understand if you want to be as big as possible and appeal to as many people as possible, you have to really tread carefully on some of these things. I don't agree with it because I think it's fucking spineless. Hold on.
My friends, I like to apologize for the behavior of my passion.
Okay. So clicked it twice. Sorry. I have to. It's like this is my swear jar now. I hope it doesn't get too annoying. Damn! Every time I do that, I lose my train of thought. Yeah. So look, this is the long and short of it. It's pretty terrible. But here is, I want to always, for the last almost 48 hours now, let's say 40 plus hours since I learned about this, I've been like trying to, in my heart, find what is the best way you can frame this entire situation for Peter Attia. And I've been kind of thinking about it in a couple of ways. And what I think one of them you will enjoy. It's kind of humorous. Try to make light of a pretty messed up situation, because it if you take things too seriously, you might fall into a depression, right? So the first, I think one of the first sort of, I kind of already mentioned that, is one of the ways. So the first conversation that we see here is around 2015. Peter Attia wasn't huge back then. He was up and coming. He's become huge over the last 10 years, 10 12 years. But so he wasn't huge, so he didn't have influence yet as much as he does now. So maybe they were like, they groom a lot of people, and they kind of, they seem to email. There was like some emails to people that were like the response to the person. They were like, oh, he would like, Jeffrey would like to meet you. He'll be in this place this time. And sometimes some of those people, some of those emails show that they're like, no, sorry, I'm busy. And some of those people are like, you know what, I'm not gonna have anything to do with this stuff, because it was 2015. It was 2008 when he was convicted for the first time, so they knew what's up. So some people are like, you know what, no. uh, so that's one way you can, hopefully, if you're smart, avoid the whole thing. But then there's other people that wanted to. Apparently some people, they were like trying to meet with him. They were like emailing his assistant. So we don't know how it started, obviously, with Peter Attia, but it could have been where, look, he's a doctor and he has someone coming to him to be a patient, and just because they've been convicted of something doesn't mean that they shouldn't be allowed the services of whatever you provide. It's bad business to turn away business like that, because especially someone that's also, could bring you other business, other patients, or clients. So maybe it started with like, okay, yeah, sure, let's I'll be your concierge doctor, 150, 200K, whatever. And maybe Epstein offered even more, to for his extra services. So maybe how it started innocently enough for Atiyah, but then what they do is they try to, rope you in. This is me speculating here. Allegedly, I'm not saying I know anything. I'm not, I've just read and researched about this stuff over the last, years. This is kind of the way I see things. Not Don't take it as, gospel, but then they will try to rope you in somehow. What we know is that apparently Atiyah was staying in Epstein's apartments in New York and stuff. So it they became friendly over time. So not sure not sure did it progress from something fairly innocent like doctor client relationship, but they did become friends. That's why he mentions him being a friend, and then wanting to go to the island, and then, by the way, one of the emails, the subject line is got a fresh shipment, which is pretty sinister sounding. Can interpret it way too many colorful ways, which, depending on your tinfoil hat, the size of your tinfoil hat, can many different ways you can think about it. So that's kind of like one way I thought, maybe he he then the opportunities were there for him is what then allowed him to get himself roped into all of this stuff, because fame, and the book did incredibly well, like New York Times bestseller. There was a picture with him and Oprah, and like he's been on all the big podcasts on TV, and patients of fame and whatever. So he's been getting a lot of doors opening for him. He's an investor and advisor in quite a lot of companies. So I think that's how you get roped in, and the more invested in, and the more kind of like stuff you get, the more like you can't say no. Oh, do you want to come to this party? Do you want to come here? Do you want to like do this? And if you're like, if you say no, I can't, you get FOMO, like, oh, what if like they don't invite me again if I don't come, or if I don't put out whatever like favor they need, they might not ask again. I might just, because there's that aspect to it, and maybe that's how he kind of, he's like, shit, I gotta play the game, and look at all the success I've been getting. I don't want it to stop, and I certainly do want it to grow if possible. Who wouldn't think that? Many people would, maybe not everybody. Not everybody wants or needs that. So maybe that's how he kind of got roped into things. Not, again, not excusing it by any means. I'm just trying to see if is there potentially like a less horrible way to kind of look at this. So that's one way. Now here's the other one, and I think this one is a little bit, I'm just trying to like be a little bit tongue in cheek here, just to end on a bit of a more positive humor. I like to kind of joke around a little bit. But what if, and you have to be insanely delusionally optimistic to actually believe this. But what if Peter Attia was trying to get close to Epstein to fuck him up? Allow me to explain. But before I do that,
My friends, I'd like to apologize for the behavior of my passion.
sorry, but I have to redact some of these after. So what if Peter Attia, he's like, nah, dude, I'm gonna fuck this guy up. I'm gonna get in there and gonna destroy his health. How could he have done that? Well, as it turns out, if you look into the files, and let me just find, I had them here somewhere. It's another tab here. Sorry, one second. So if you look into the files, it turns out that Atiyah was really trying to get Epstein on the statins. Okay. And not only that, but he was trying to get Epstein on a low carb diet. And Epstein was very, very much against both of those things. Okay. Let me just find, I'm going to pause for a second and find it. Okay. So sorry about that. I had thought I saved some of these. Anyway, so there's a there's some emails that I saw. I was kind of like putting in the search there on the justice.gov site slash Epstein, putting like low carb statin. So there was a dude called Larry Summers, and geez, I forget now. Sorry about this. Like Larry Summers. He's like something with the Treasury Secret. Not what is it? Larry Summers. He 27th president of of Harvard University from 2001 2006. So he was the 71st United States Secretary of the Treasury from 99 to 2001. So that dude was emailing his doctor or some other person in that capacity, saying that Epstein told him that the low carb diet makes you dumber. And then there's another email here from Larry Summers to David S. Finn, MD. I have heard the reports about statins, of which Crestor is one, and cognitive concerns long term. Not heard as much about the low carb diets and cognition, but we'll check it out. That's the doctor David Finn responding to Larry Summers. So that's like one of them. Then the one that I saw yesterday was this one. So Lauren H. Summers to George Church. George, Jeff Epstein says I should worry that a low carb diet directed at me from redacted is at risk of making me dumber. Also says redacted impedes cognition. Do you agree, Larry? And then below that, follow me on Twitter at LH Summers. Okay, that's the guy. And then George answers him with 2 points. A low carb diet is often ketogenic. Crestor. So just a real doctor response, like, oh, you just gotta take CoQ10 with the statin, and he's talking about how this is a doctor, how he brought down his cholesterol from 285 to 205 with vegan diet after mild myopathy readings with statins. So this is a doctor's experience. So so Lawrence Summers says, thanks, very helpful, bit reassuring on my plan relative to listening to Jeffrey. Hope to see you soon, Larry. And and then there was another email from Lawrence H. Summers to Jeffrey Epstein, forwarding all of this. You are more dramatic than him. So I I don't know, but like for what it seems, and I kind of I saw another email from Epstein to Peter Attia, where Epstein had shared some news article. A woman had crashed a car or something, and she was a statin taker. So what it seems like is that Epstein was really apprehensive to doing the low carb diet and taking statins and just in general drugs. So the best sort of thing I can think of here is that these doctors were trying to get him on as many drugs as possible, maybe get him to do low carb diet, maybe a vegan diet to really mess him up as quickly as possible. And they were like really, really good guys. But again, you have to be insanely delusional to think that they weren't doing the best they knew. And what is the best? These amazing doctors that he had the access to the best in the world. What is the best they had to offer? Is freaking take a statin, and of course CoQ10 will help with the myopathy which you might get, and what, and then get on a low carb diet. Like they were like obsessed with like getting his cholesterol down. Like this is the best care that money can get, apparently, when you have unlimited buckets of it. Shocking, shocking. Because we know that they believe that, because most doctor and too many doctors still were like, of that belief that it's cholesterol is the problem. They're obsessed, like they're wasting all this time on and energy on cholesterol and trying to get this guy to eat low. And he like you can never say that the guy was stupid, necessarily. He probably didn't have enough time to do proper research into health and nutrition, but he was not that dumb to believe even Peter Attia, who he was paying probably 100,000, 50, 200,000 plus a year, or maybe even well more than that, to be his concierge doctor. And even then, he didn't believe him. He didn't take the damn statins. And then there was another, I think there was another email where Atiyah was like, "When are we gonna get you on a, PCSK9 inhibitor, which is another cholesterol lowering drug, a bit newer, different mechanism." So, dude, even friggin' Epstein buying the best care in the world, allegedly, ostensibly, even he was like, you know what? Even these best of the best doctors maybe just not correct about this cholesterol low carb stuff, and taking statins and PCSK9 inhibitors. So that's, you want to believe, you want to believe that they were like, no, dude, like, you know what, this guy has to be stopped. We need to get him on a low carb diet. And by the way, I don't, I think he was maybe trying to like follow some of the low carb stuff. Apparently on one test his that was shown, his testosterone was 185, which was like really really bad. And you could definitely see that on a low carb diet, because like even big strong guys like that, what's the carnivore guy, Dr. Sean Baker, he his testosterone at some point was like 200 something. Peter Attia's testosterone was like something like 300 at one point, 350, or maybe even less, super low, because of course of all of his intermittent fasting and low carb stuff, but yeah, you would, if you were a delusional child wanting to see everything through rose colored glasses, you'd be like, oh yeah, these guys are just trying to mess him up with these low carb diets and statins and stuff. But like, no, they were trying to, like, they were doing the best they can, and that's all they can do. So that is, unfortunately, the top of the food chain in the health and longevity space. And look, all of the Epstein stuff aside, if you see what they're recommending out there, and I'm using Peter Attia as an example, because a lot of what other people levels below him recommend is based on what he recommends. A lot of the health space is people parroting stuff from people higher up. For example, 2008, when I really got into all the podcasts and stuff, not all of them, but like some of them, I like super hard into them. Like Dave Asprey was one of the first ones that I found on via Tim Ferriss, and it was like, not that I was parenting Dave Asprey, but like a lot of the ideas, the autophagy, the red light therapy, the blue blockers, and not all of it was bad, of course, don't get me wrong. Like I still do some of those things that I learned, but a lot of it, like the ketones and measuring the ketones and cyclical ketosis and fasting to upregulate autophagy, and just, it's nauseating just thinking how naive and sort of green I was, back then. And we were all parroting the same stuff. And I see kind of newer folks in the space parroting those same things. And what, like, lines like, there's no such thing as a essential carbohydrate, parroting things like, you need to become fat adapted, metabolic flexibility, things like, you know, what is autophagy? It's cellular cleanup, and like a lot of like just kind of one liners being thrown around by people that just, they've they've decided that person is a good source of information, therefore I just have to learn as much as I can from them, and then I'm set. And that the problem is that if, as in this example, if that person is, first of all, classically, that not classic in the classic sense, but conventionally trained by mainstream medicine, which is funded and ran by the pharmaceutical mafia, that's already a problem, because most of those people, most of the, like, the huge majority of those doctors are then automatons that just try to get you on the statins, try to just drug you, hydrocortisone, get you on the steroids for whatever ails you, and really just very barbaric sort of stuff, like surgeries, get your gallbladder out, just, it's horrific. And I work with clients, and I talk to my clients 3 times a week, on my coaching call. So I hear, like, just the amount of stories I've heard, and just horrific. Like, just last night on our Sunday call, we're talking about gallbladders, and then one of my clients, like, both of his two of his close family members had their gallbladders removed. And it just, you mention one thing, and then the conversations end up like, God, like, what's going on? And another guy, really cool guy, he's gonna be at an Acapulco next week. He's telling me about his shout out Johnny. He's telling me about, like, his parents, and I'm sorry to bring this up, bro. I know you're probably listening. But he's telling me about his parents, like, cancer stuff after COVID vaccines, and just, like, the amount of suffering and damage to humanity at the hands of these men in butcher coats is unimaginable. It's of horrific proportions. So that's a huge problem in and of itself. So you have someone like that then that gets into these circles that tell him you can have fame, fortune, and more if you want it, if you know what I'm saying. Then it gets extra nefarious, because at that point, even if he wanted to bring to your attention stuff that is important for you, don't take XYZ intervention, don't eat XYZ foods, oils, whatever, he may be told, listen, let's just keep it to a bit more, you know stuff that's not, it's not so controversial. Let's just keep it to, make sure your cholesterol numbers are low. If they're not, we're going to get you on a statin. Talk to your doctor about a statin, and educate the public about the important things, if you know what we mean. And then, if the carrot doesn't work, and usually works, I think for a lot of people it works, because the stick can be particularly horrific. Because in this case, just in again, I'm using this case as an example, and I again, I want to give him the benefit of the doubt here, of course, all that good stuff. But in this case, you see the reputational damage of just being associated to Epstein, how bad it is. Like, if you go on his, at least on Instagram and X, I don't, maybe I did check YouTube yesterday, maybe I didn't, I forget. But if you go to his Instagram and X, the last three to five posts, pretty much all the comments are gonna be, gonna make a statement about this, like, are you this, are you that, uh, you know horrible things, unsubscribing, da, 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 so just that, the damage of being associated is horrific. And this is sort of collateral damage from a much bigger incident for him. But imagine if he pissed them off, and he had said, you know what, fuck you guys, excuse me.
My friends, I'd like to apologize for the behavior of my passion.
Oops, I clicked it twice again. So imagine if you'd pissed them off, man. Like, you just, you don't even want to imagine what can happen to one that is in, like, the way from my, at least from my kind of research into this, and I probably researched this kind of stuff a lot more than is necessary for good mental health, to be honest. But, and certainly much more than your regular Joe Jane on the street out there. From what I understand, is like, this is the kind of club that once you're in, there's the only way out really is either death, or, like, your reputation just completely and utterly destroyed, type thing. So once you're in it, there's a hell of a lot of incentive to stay, because, of course, the money, the fame, the hookers, and etc. That's whatever. That's not. This is not that kind of show. So the incentives are pretty good for the people. And then again, the disincentives are really, really convincing, if you know what I mean. Very, very few people probably would try to speak out and stuff like that, that are not victims, outright victims, of course. That many victims are silenced and too scared to say anything because some of them have families and what could happen. So it's so messed up. Like I don't like again. I don't think everybody out there. A lot of my listeners probably like know more about this stuff than me, but like many people out there are not ready to even like begin the. It's so dark, this whole stuff. But anyway, the moral of the story here is, and I've said this quite a few times over the last couple of years, is now anytime somebody or something gets very big, very popular, whether it's a supplement, an intervention, a diet, a person, we just have to be very careful about especially blindly trusting them. Like some of them might be good people, some of them might be well intentioned, but we just have to be careful. We have to be very careful with again with Atiyah. To me, it was just with folks at least that are deeper into health. A lot of people could see through the bullshit. Again, it's a medical doctor talking about getting on he takes statins. He wants almost all his patients on statins and then other drugs. And then of course make sure you're vaccinated, make sure everybody's vaccinated, all the jib jabs, all the boosters, all that good stuff. So that's actually pretty easy to see through for like many people, but it can be a little bit more tricky than that in less obvious cases. So we have to be very careful with what's allowed, because a lot of the stuff that becomes mainstream, it becomes mainstream because it's allowed to become mainstream. It's not, a lot of times not organic. It's hard to, there's no organic reach nowadays. So if you can be pushed up by the algorithm, you can pay for a lot of like traffic and ads and stuff. That's another way if you have cash. And then of course you can be pushed up the algorithm, if it picks you up via its AI, or if there's certain parameters in there that are tweaked. There's like, we got, for example, fasting. If you want to look for fasting information, you will find on YouTube, you'll find oodles of almost copy paste videos about the autophagy, the cellular cleanup, the nonsense, the BS. Thousands of people. But then if you want to look for like the negative effects of fasting, the best I found was, is fasting a scam? Is intermittent fasting this? Are you gonna is it all this sort of like ostensibly like the devil's advocate point of view? Could fasting be harmful? And it always ends up being a positive spin on fasting. It was a clickbait title and thumbnail to get you to click, and like 7 minutes later I'm like, you son of a bitches, you I thought you were gonna say something against the grain, maybe give a different perspective. And just in case you don't know this, I apologize. Please forgive me for the behavior of my passion thing. I'm gonna play the full thing and then we're gonna wrap today because I have been talking at you enough. Thanks for tuning in.
Zdravo! Welcome!
Wait, I clicked. Sorry. Try again.
Zdravo! Welcome! Welcome! Sit anywhere you like. Sit here. This is good. Sit right here. Sit right here. Sit right here. There you go. That's a good lady. Yes, all right. There you go. First time? First time? Is the first time? First time? First time for you? First time?
Yes.
All right, then. Dobra. All right.
So what's good?
Oh, good. I tell you, you have to have the kebapi. Kebapi is what you're going to have, okay?
Oh, don't they serve that in the cafe across the street?
No! You cannot get the kebapi at the cafe across the street!
What? What did I say?
Across the street is Albanian. This cafe, Macedonian. Macedonian.
My friends, I'd like to apologize for the behavior of my passion. I just feel bad in my brain for people to think that your mouths will have been raped by the food that they're serving at these Albanian mother bitches. These mother bitches, sons of my bitch, across the street, what they be serving is cevapi.